Hey guys, tonight we slip into a much older world, a time of damp stone cottages, woolen blankets, and some truly confusing beauty choices. You're going to wake up in the heart of the medieval countryside, where the sun rises slow and the roosters are alarmingly enthusiastic. You'll step into a life that's quieter, scratchier, and definitely smellier than the one you're used to. But don't worry, I'll be right here, guiding you through every eyebrow plucking, rose water rinsing moment. Quick warning though, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not because of dragons or duels or anything dramatic. No, it's the hygiene and the cheese and the lead-based face powder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the soft creak of wooden beams, the air thick with the scent of straw, fire smoke, and something mildly goatish. You're in a medieval cottage, tucked beneath a woolen blanket that itches like it holds a personal grudge. The bed isn't much, just a mattress stuffed with hay, lumpy in all the wrong places. A small window lets in a narrow beam of morning light, illuminating dust motes that dance slowly, like they're still deciding whether it's worth waking up. You stretch. Something pops, possibly your knees. Welcome to the 130OS. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, your bare feet meeting the cold packed earth floor. There's no central heating, obviously, just a small fireplace in the corner, its embers still glowing from the night before. There's a jug of water beside a ceramic basin, and a small, wobbly stool where someone has left a wooden comb, a scrap of cloth, and what looks suspiciously like hardened soap. You hope it's soap. There's no mirror in the room, just a polished piece of bronze hanging on the wall. It's dark and warped and makes your nose look vaguely goat-shaped. You stare into it anyway. This is your only chance to check your medieval morning face. Outside, you hear a rooster making threats. You also hear voices, low, sleepy ones. Your host family, perhaps, or the neighbors already arguing about sheep again. You pad over to the door, unlatch it, and step into the village lane. The sun is barely up, painting everything in a soft golden glaze. Smoke curls from thatched rooftops. The smell of baking bread mingles with wet moss and chimney soot. It's a calm, foggy morning, the kind where nothing moves too fast, and even the chickens look drowsy. Your hands are chilly. You rub them together, noticing your nails, they're clean, but short and uneven. In this world, soft, pale hands are a sign of status. Yours? Let's just say you look like someone who definitely hauls buckets before breakfast. A woman greets you with a slow nod and a basket full of turnips. She's wrapped in a layered dress, and her hair is braided tightly under a linen coif. She smells faintly of thyme and sheep. You smile politely. She does not smile back. That's okay, nobody here is chipper before porridge. You follow the sound of clinking tools and chatter to the communal well. A few villagers are washing up, splashing their faces with water cold enough to wake the dead. One girl is using a cloth dipped in rainwater to scrub her cheeks. Another carefully dabs a mix of vinegar and crushed herbs under her arms. This is what counts as morning beauty. You give it a try, splashing your face, dabbing your neck, wondering whether the tingle is from mint or mild skin irritation. Either way, you're definitely awake now. A boy your age offers you a cloth and points to a lump of grayish soap. It's ash soap made from animal fat and lye. It smells like commitment. You lather it between your hands and scrub as best you can, trying to pretend you're at a medieval spa instead of standing in the middle of a chilly lane with geese pecking near your ankles. The conversation around you is hushed. The village is still waking up, Someone mentions that Lady Elspeth's daughter is wearing rouge again, and the others exchange disapproving looks. Apparently, even a hint of cheek color before church is considered bold. That's one thing. About beauty standards in this era, they're wrapped in layers of social judgment, religion, and practicality. Wearing makeup might mean you're vain, or sinful, or French. Sometimes all three. As the sun rises higher, the light softens, shadows stretch across the cobblestones. You return to your cottage, fingers pink from scrubbing, cheeks flushed from wind and judgment. There's a small fire going now, and someone's heating a pot of porridge over it. You sit near the hearth and stretch out your cold feet. A woman, maybe your host, hands you a bowl and a spoon. The porridge tastes like oats and effort. You thank her. She grunts. It might be a compliment. You notice a tiny vial on the table, beside the fire. Inside is a thick, cloudy liquid. The woman catches your glance. Rosewater, she says simply, then taps her own cheek. For days when you need a little something. You nod, unsure whether you're being offered some or gently insulted. Either way, you ask if you can try it. She shrugs. You dab a drop on your fingers and press it against your face. It's faintly floral, faintly sour, kind of like beauty, in this time fragile, fleeting, and possibly fermented. Historians still wonder how widespread these kinds of routines were. Did peasants really dab on rosewater? Did everyone share the same soap? Or are we only glimpsing the neatest parts through biased records and hopeful artwork? There's no clear answer, but as you sit beside the fire, cheeks flushed with rose and scrubbed with lye, you feel like you're starting to belong here just a little. Outside, the village is fully awake now. Hooves clatter, dogs bark. A bell rings in the distance, summoning someone, somewhere. You lean back on your stool, arms warmed by the fire, and wonder what's next in this slow, strange, and unexpectedly fragrant day. The fire crackles softly behind you, its glow flickering across the wooden walls like a slow dance. Someone has placed a bowl of herbs near the hearth to dry lavender, rosemary, and something slightly suspicious that smells a bit like pickle brine. You don't ask. You've learned it's better not to. After finishing your porridge, which improves significantly once you realize there's honey tucked at the bottom, you step outside once more. The village is alive now. A cart rattles by, chickens scatter in dramatic protest, and a dog with 3 legs and limitless confidence struts down the lane. You're pointed toward a washing space near the edge of the village, more of a wooden bench beside a slow-moving stream. You're here for a deeper clean now, something a little more thorough. The villagers call it freshening up. You suspect it might be code for removing a small layer of skin. There's a stone basin filled with water drawn from the stream, cold and clear, with a hint of moss. You sit beside it and watch a girl around your age, her sleeves rolled, her fingers red from scrubbing, dip a cloth into a mix of ashes and water. She hands you a fresh one and nods toward a small bowl. You dip your fingers into it. It's gritty, gray, and smells like someone boiled a fireplace. This is ash soap created from hardwood ashes and animal fat, boiled down until it resembles cleanliness. Supposedly, you rub it between your palms. The texture is somewhere between fine sand and yesterday's porridge. As you wash your arms, you realize it doesn't lather at all, but it does make you feel cleaner, if only because your skin now squeaks like freshly polished wood. A woman with a soft voice and stern eyebrows offers you a second bowl. This one contains a water and herb mixture, mostly rosemary, thyme, and what might be mint or possibly a stinging nettle in disguise. She calls it a rinse, and when you press the cool mix to your face, it stings just enough to make your eyes water. You thank her with a shaky smile. She nods and mutters something about city skin. She's not wrong. The washing process continues. With surprising ritual, a younger girl is brushing her hair with what looks like a hedgehog on a stick. It's actually a brush made from pig bristles nailed into a bit of driftwood. Effective in its own terrifying way. You're handed a wool cloth to dry off, and while the texture is assertive, it does the job. Your skin tingles. Your hair feels strangely buoyant. You smell faintly of burnt rosemary, but in a charming way, like someone who wrestled a shrubbery and won. Then comes the moment of communal comparison. As the villagers finish their wash, they glance at one another quietly, noting the glow of skin, the tameness of hair, the straightness of posture. No one says anything, but you can feel it in the silence. Beauty here isn't about excess. It's about neatness, restraint, a kind of composed humility. You begin to understand the logic. In a world where everything's rough and raw, where mud is a regular shoe companion and winters bite through 6 layers of wool, cleanliness becomes elegance. Simplicity becomes style. If your cheeks are glowing and your nails aren't full of dirt, you might as well be royalty. Boy near you is rubbing lemon balm into his hands. It's a rare treat, stolen from a nearby monastery garden. It leaves a faint citrus smell. He grins at you with green-stained fingers and winks. You don't know if that's flirtation or just pride in his theft. Either way, you approve. You notice that everyone has a different approach to hygiene. Some stick to the basics: ash, water, wool. Others have tiny vials of vinegar infusions, or dried flower petals tucked into linen sachets. A few even dab honey on their cheeks for glow, not snacks. Though it could go either way, historians believe that bathing in medieval Europe was less common than we like to think, but that doesn't mean people didn't care about being clean. Water was precious. Heating it was tedious. Full body baths were rare, but wiping, scrubbing, and scenting, that happened often, especially in towns with access to rivers, herbs, and someone who owned more than one pot. Still, some argue that personal hygiene varied wildly depending on where you lived. Did a Londoner bathe more than a farmer in Burgundy? Did a merchant's wife in Venice use imported musk while a Welsh shepherd relied on mint and luck? No one can say for certain, but the effort was there, and the occasional nettle sting. You finish your scrub and return to your cottage, still toweling off your neck. A small mirror well, a shiny bit of metal catches your reflection in the hearthlight. Your cheeks are flushed. Your hair is damp and relatively tame. Your eyes somehow a bit bright. Maybe it's the rosemary. Maybe it's the lemon balm envy. Maybe it's the smug joy of not being coated in soot anymore. Inside, someone is boiling water for tea, an herbal mix that smells like hay, sage, and the kind of leaf that insists it's healing even if it just tastes like damp socks. You accept a mug anyway. It warms your hands, and you feel proud. You've survived your first medieval wash. With only minor stinging, you sit on a stool, mug cradled, listening to the crackle of the fire. The woman from earlier hums as she folds linen towels stiff with use but clean as fresh parchment. She offers you a small cloth bundle. Inside, a bit of lye soap, a sachet of dried thyme, and a wooden comb with a few hairs still clinging to it like old regrets. It's yours now. Your starter kit for medieval beauty. You smile and thank her. She waves it off like it's nothing, though you can tell by the careful way she wrapped it that it's not. Outside, someone calls for eggs. Another curses the mud. A baby shrieks with impressive range. The village goes on around you, muddy, misty, alive. You sip your tea and pull the wool blanket tighter across your shoulders. It's not glamorous, but you feel cleaner. You feel part of something, and you smell like rosemary, ashes, and bravery, which, honestly, is not a bad combination. The sun is now properly up well, as much as it ever gets in a medieval village that lives in a permanent state of mild drizzle. Chickens have taken over the pathway in front of the cottage like they're collecting tolls, and someone down the lane is banging pots together for no clear reason. You take another sip of your herby tea and exhale into the morning like someone who has, against all odds, achieved a vague sense of cleanliness. But now, it's time for a far stranger ritual. You're about to witness the ultimate sacrifice in the name of beauty. Eyebrow plucking. And not just any plucking, you're removing your eyebrows entirely, or at least most of them. Welcome to the high forehead craze. You're beckoned into the main room of a neighboring cottage. It's a bit larger, slightly less smoky, and smells like rose oil, wool, and ambition. A young noblewoman sits by the fire on a carved stool, her posture perfect, her sleeves elegantly draped despite the mud just outside the door. You're here to assist with her morning routine. She greets you with a nod that says, "You may approach, but only with tweezers." She gestures to a small wooden box beside her. Inside, you find the tools of the trade, a tiny mirror wobbly, but shinier than yours, a pair of iron tweezers that look like they could also pull nails from timber, and a comb shaped like a fish. She dips a cloth in rosewater and dabs her forehead delicately. Then, without ceremony, she begins plucking. Tiny, fine hairs. Gone. More. Gone. Then she hands you the tweezers. You stare at them. They stare back. Your task is to help her define her forehead, which in this context means remove anything above the brow ridge that could suggest she ever had eyebrows to begin with. High, clear foreheads were considered the absolute pinnacle of beauty. The higher the better. A broad, blank canvas of philosophical thinking, or at the very least, extreme dedication to personal grooming. As you start to gently pluck, she winces once, just a flicker, and then returns to her serene, almost bored expression. She's done this before, probably hundreds of times. This is part of her daily preparation, her war paint, her forehead real estate investment. You ask if it hurts. She smiles faintly. Beauty, she says, is always a little painful. Otherwise, everyone would have it. That's not entirely comforting, but it is very medieval. You do your best to mimic the process, carefully following the upper curve of her brow and creating that unmistakable empty space above her eyes. The result is startling. Her face now looks both regal and mildly surprised. This practice wasn't limited to women. Some men, especially those at court, also shaped their hairlines, plucked stray facial hair, and cultivated carefully trimmed beards, if any at all. But for noble women, the high forehead wasn't just about fashion. It was a status symbol, a sign that you didn't work outside, that you had time to sit still and shape your face every morning, that you were, essentially, ornamental. Historians still debate why exactly this look became so popular. Some blame early classical influences, Roman statues, and Byzantine icons. Others believe it was all about contrast. In a world full of sweat and grime, appearing smooth, pale, and eerily hairless made you stand out. What they agree on is this: it took dedication. There were no razors, no waxing kits, no gentle electric options, just tweezers, time, and a high pain threshold. After the plucking comes the soothing. The noblewoman presses a cloth soaked in chamomile water against her forehead, then applies a thin smear of almond oil to prevent redness. She lets out a slow sigh, like someone who has just weathered a tiny storm of vanity. You look in the mirror again, this time holding it up to your own face. You raise your brows, or at least you try to. It's hard to be expressive when half your eyebrows are gone. She notices your reflection and chuckles. You'll get used to it, will you? That remains to be seen. She motions for you to take a seat on the stool. Wait, is it your turn now? Apparently so. Before you can object, She's gently patting your forehead with rose water and inspecting your eyebrows like a tailor measuring fabric. A little pluck, she says. Not too much. You still need to look intelligent. You're not sure what that means, but she's already started. It stings. Not horribly, but enough to remind you that this is a lifestyle, a commitment, a quiet, plucky rebellion against nature. When she's done, she steps back and gestures for you to look in the mirror again. Your brows are minimal, airy, gently confused. You look like someone who's just been asked a very difficult riddle by a goat. But strangely enough, you don't hate it. You feel lighter, smoother, almost ethereal, like a freshly scrubbed painting. A younger girl enters the room, eyes wide as she takes in the scene. Are we still doing brows? She whispers. The noblewoman replies, always. You step outside. Later, blinking into the late morning light, forehead fully exposed to the wind. A passing monk does a double take. You're not sure if that's a compliment, but you feel part of something now, a long, weird, beautifully painful tradition. Your forehead tingles. The breeze feels like it has more room to dance. A small price for beauty, or a large one, depending on your opinion of tweezers. You're starting to settle into the rhythm of this strange, scrubbed, and slightly floral medieval life. The cottage smells like drying herbs, burning wood, and now something faintly metallic, which makes sense, because today, you're learning about makeup, and most of it could technically kill you. You've been summoned once again to the noblewoman's quarters. She's sitting upright near a window, morning light falling across her face like a spotlight. Her expression is regal, slightly bored, and terrifyingly still. Today, you're helping with the application of her face paint. That sounds fun, until you realize paint isn't a metaphor. She opens a small chest, revealing tiny pots and vials carefully tucked into fabric folds. The contents are impressive, and frankly, a little alarming. Powders the color of fresh parchment, blush made from crushed minerals, and a pale blue paste that looks suspiciously like cake frosting, but smells like silver coins. This is the elite's beauty arsenal, designed not just to enhance, but to transform. And that transformation starts with white. Pale skin was the cornerstone of medieval beauty. It signaled wealth, virtue, and the glorious fact that you never ever worked outside. The paler the better. You, dear listener, are about to become a glowing beacon of privilege and potential. Anemia. She begins with the base powder, a mixture of vinegar, egg whites, and white lead. Yes, lead. The kind your modern self knows should never go on faces or anywhere, really. But in this century, it's prized for its velvety texture and staying power, like the medieval version of high-end foundation, except with more neurological consequences. You dip a small cloth into the mixture and gently press it to her cheeks, her chin, her forehead, which, you may recall, has been freshly plucked to its maximum square footage. The result? Instant elegance. She looks like a porcelain statue, or a very serious ghost. Then comes the blue. Not everywhere, just a fine line traced along her temples and neck to highlight her pale skin. It's meant to look like veins, because nothing says beauty like the faint suggestion of noble fragility. See how near death I am, the look whispers. How poetically delicate. You try it yourself in the mirror. The effect is subtle, if you're being generous. You mostly look like you just lost a bet with a blueberry. Next is rouge crushed. Safflower petals, or sometimes cochineal beetles. Yes, beetles dabbed onto the cheeks in small, upward strokes. This is meant to imitate the natural blush of virtue, or embarrassment, or the effort of walking uphill in full velvet. Your noble friend applies it with care, glancing at her reflection as if consulting an oracle. She adds a touch to her lips too, just enough color to suggest health, but not too much. Too red, and people might talk. And in this village, people always talk. As she finishes, she sprinkles a bit of powdered iris root onto her shoulders and neck. It's meant to help with scent, but it also makes her skin shimmer faintly in the light. You suspect this was the medieval version of a glow-up. You lean closer, studying the final result. The effect is both subtle and dramatic, like she's been carved out of ivory and blushed by moonlight. She looks powerful, unreachable, slightly toxic, which is accurate. Historians agree that white lead makeup was a common beauty staple among medieval European elites. What they still puzzle over is how much the women truly knew about its risks. Some writings warned of sickness from paints. Others shrugged it off in favor of good portraits. The line between vanity and self-harm was as thin as a silk veil. Still, people persisted. The makeup rituals were daily, thorough, sometimes applied in layers thick enough to crack if you smiled too hard. But smiling wasn't fashionable anyway. Beauty was in composure, not joy. You help pack the vials back into their little chest. She applies a final dab of almond oil to her hands and offers you the leftover rouge. "You'll need it," she says, with a smirk that somehow is fashionable. Outside the cottage, the air feels cooler against your powdered skin. A man walks by, catches a glimpse of your face, and stumbles slightly. Either he's dazzled by your ghostly glow or just surprised someone with your eyebrows is still making public appearances. You pass by a group of younger girls drawing water at the well. One whispers to another, nodding in your direction. You catch the word painted. It's not an insult. It's almost envy. As you reach the cottage again, you catch your reflection in the bronze mirror. Your skin looks smooth, artificially so. Your cheeks are delicately flushed. Your eyes, well, you're still figuring out how to make the vein tracing look elegant. But you're getting there. And best of all, your face is doing exactly what it's supposed to, lying, telling everyone who sees you that you are healthy, wealthy, clean, and entirely unbothered by farm smells, damp boots, or the existential dread of living without plumbing, which is, of course, the real power of makeup then and now. You sit by the fire again, powdered and pretty, sipping herbal tea that still tastes like boiled broom. But you don't mind, today. Your beauty has sharp cheekbones, pale shoulders, and the lingering danger of light poisoning. And honestly, you've never felt more medieval. It's midday now, and the village has reached peak productivity. HOs scrape in garden beds, wheels creak under the weight of barley, and someone is yelling about a missing goat with enough passion to suggest it might be a recurring issue. You, however, are on a very different quest. A holy one. Hair. In this world, hair is more than a fashion statement. It's more than hygiene, more than style, more than the occasional lice scare. Hair is sacred, symbolic, a source of feminine mystique, masculine nobility, religious tension, and romantic poetry. You are about to discover that in medieval life, hair was practically a spiritual event. Back in the noblewoman's cottage, she sits in front of a small carved mirror, a long comb in hand. Her hair thick, dark, and gleaming like polished walnut is already partially unbound, falling in soft waves down her back. You've been asked to help, again, and not just to brush. You're here to braid, bind, and eventually veil. You reach for the wooden comb and begin gently pulling it through her hair. It's quiet work, rhythmic, calming, even. Each stroke releases the scent of rose oil and faint smoke from the hearth. Her hair is soft but heavy, like silk dipped in memory. She tells you about the importance of modesty, that a woman's hair is a source of power. Yes, but also temptation. That's why it's often covered, or tightly braided, or wrapped in elaborate headgear that looks like it could double as emergency scaffolding. But beneath those layers is real meaning. A woman wearing her hair loose may be unmarried or scandalous, Braided hair suggests control, discipline, and readiness for marriage. A veil means dignity. A wimple means piety. A jeweled hairnet, that means someone is showing off, and likely to be judged at the next church gathering. You finish brushing and begin to braid, your fingers mimicking the motions you've watched others make today. The braid is long, simple, neat. She nods in approval. Then comes the binding, a silk ribbon wrapped around the base, followed by a linen cap tied under her chin. It frames her face and tucks her hair neatly away, like a secret only she is allowed to remember. She turns to you. Your turn, she says. Of course. You sit, and she begins brushing your hair. Her hands are practiced, gentle. She murmurs something about oiling the ends with goose fat, which you pretend to agree with while praying she forgets. She parts your hair down the center. The only acceptable medieval style side parts were for chaos and people with something to hide. Then, two simple braids. She ties them off with thread and slides a thin veil over your head. It slips softly into place, cooling your forehead and your thoughts. You glance in the mirror. You look composed, like someone who knows how to churn butter and recite Latin. It's a powerful combo. Outside, you pass a group of women hanging laundry, their hair tightly coiled and pinned. One older woman has a net made of gold thread over her braid, a luxury that announces, "Yes, I do own 3 chickens. Thank you very much." Not all hair was treated equally. While noble women oiled, scented, and braided with ribbons, peasant women often kept their hair simple and practical, tied back, covered with scarves, sometimes cropped short out of necessity, lice, or the simple need to keep it out of the bread dough. Men's hair varied too. Some kept it shoulder length and curled. Others, particularly monks, shaved the classic tonsure, that little donut of baldness meant to symbolize humility, but also possibly functioning as early scalp ventilation. And then there were knights, who treated their hair with as much care as their armor. Wavy locks, yes, please, greased with bare fat and combed until they gleamed like poetry in motion. Hair wasn't just decoration, it was identity, a reflection of age, class, religion, and sometimes mood. During plagues or mourning, people shaved their heads. During festivals, they decorated their braids with flowers or colorful ribbons. During church, well, they mostly covered it up and prayed no one saw their flyaways. Historians still debate how often people washed their hair. Was it weekly? Monthly? Only when birds began to nest in it. Some evidence suggests rinsing with herbal infusions. Rosemary, lavender, oil was common. Oils were used to tame frizz and add shine, but full shampooing as we know it, not so much. One record tells of a French noblewoman who used boiled lizard fat for shine. Another mentions goat milk and crushed violets. You have to respect the commitment, and also question the judgment. You step outside again, veil fluttering gently as a breeze picks up. The air carries the scent of wet stone, hay, and somewhere distant a pastry you deeply hope is headed your way. A group of children runs by, chasing a dog with a stolen cloth in its mouth. You adjust your veil, not because you're modest, but because this is now your look. You pause by the stream, staring at your reflection. Your braided hair peeks from beneath the linen. You look dignified, elegant, slightly sunburned. The veil slips, and you adjust it with the kind of practiced grace that suggests you were born in the 14th century. Hair isn't just hair here. It's ceremony. It's communication. It's a quietly powerful thing that can be hidden or highlighted depending on who you are and what you want people to think you are. You walk back toward the cottage, braid swinging gently at your back, veil fluttering with every step. You are part of the tradition now, one careful stroke of the comb at a time. You're back in the cottage again, perched on a rickety stool next to a wooden table that smells faintly of beeswax and cabbage. There's a bowl of something stewing on the hearth, possibly dinner, possibly just an aromatic experiment, and the soft crackle of the fire lulls the air into a low, cozy hush. Today, you're preparing for a feast. Not your average meal, mind you. Not just bread, cheese, and that one dried apple someone's been saving since Lent. This is a proper gathering: candlelight, cloth napkins, actual meat, and most importantly, people. It's a chance to be seen, judged politely and silently, admired from across the table for your visible ribs and well-formed elbows. Yes, this is the part of the journey where you learn. Being beautiful in the medieval world sometimes meant being a little bit hungry. Your hostess stands at the mirror again, smoothing the sleeves of her gown and subtly checking her jawline for any signs of fullness. She's already lightly pinched her cheeks for color, dabbed something that smells suspiciously like apple cider on her temples, and now she's debating if she should skip the midday meal. Just bread and water, she sighs. So I don't look puffy. Welcome to fashionable fasting. You step outside with her into the courtyard, where you're greeted by the mingled smells of roasted meats and wood smoke. But you're both ignoring it. It's not quite the done thing to look too enthusiastic about food, at least not if you're aiming for medieval chic. Beauty, particularly for women of noble birth, often meant delicacy. A slim figure wasn't just attractive. It was virtuous. It meant you were disciplined, modest, and above such base desires as roasted goose legs. As you walk through the village, you pass a group of peasants cheerfully eating a stew out of a communal pot, each one looking like they've never once counted a calorie. Their cheeks are flushed from hard work, and they laugh easily, loudly. No one's worried about being dainty. Their lives are ruled by hunger of a different kind, the real, stomach-gnawing kind that comes with seasons of bad harvests, and too many mouths to feed. You, however, are headed to the manor. Inside the hall, everything is arranged for display. Tapestries, candles, a disturbingly lifelike roasted pig with an apple shoved uncomfortably in its mouth. People file in dressed in their finest, which often means a surprising number of layers and sleeves so long they might double as handkerchiefs. You're seated at the lower table. Not quite important, not quite ignored. Bread is passed. You tear off a polite corner. Cheese follows. You nibble. A server offers you a cup of honeyed wine, and you take it because hydration is fashionable, and also because this cup is beautiful. It's pewter, slightly dented, and engraved with the image of a deer that looks oddly smug. As the feast continues, you notice something odd. No one is truly feasting. At least, not the ladies. They cut their meat into dainty portions, tuck bread discreetly into handkerchiefs, and sip broth as if it's the nectar of the divine. Occasionally someone dabs their lips with the cloth and announces they're quite satisfied. You know for a fact they've eaten exactly one prune. This, too, is part of beauty, restraint. A woman who controls her appetite is thought to control her desires, her emotions, her impulses. You can almost hear the moral undercurrent being spooned into the stew. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some monks argued that extreme fasting was dangerous, even sinful, that it bordered on vanity disguised as piety, but others, especially certain saints, practically turned it into a competitive sport. St. Catherine of Siena famously lived on practically nothing but water and the Eucharist for years, which is impressive, and also extremely alarming. Historians still wonder how much of this fasting was spiritual, and how much was social pressure. Were women simply being devout, or were they subtly playing the beauty game in a world where thinness symbolized moral superiority? You tear another tiny piece of bread. You're starting to feel a little faint, but you sip your wine and try to smile gracefully through the rumble in your stomach. The woman beside you leans in and whispers, "There's a pigeon pie under the table for later." You love her immediately. There's music now, a lute, a small harp, and someone playing a reed instrument with so much breath you suspect he might pass out. People begin to dance, slowly, stiffly, as though their stomachs are full of butterflies instead of beef. You stand and sway a little. Someone spins you, gently, and your veil slips to the side. A man across the hall watches. He nods. You think, this means he finds you attractive, or possibly that your hair is sticking out at an improper angle. Later, after the feast, you help clear the dishes. A woman hands you a satchel and murmurs, "For tomorrow." Inside, a chunk of salted fish, a hunk of cheese, and miraculously a plum. You consider proposing marriage. Back in the cottage, you settle in for the night, stomach still mostly empty, but heart weirdly full. It turns out beauty isn't just about how you look. It's also about how well you can pretend you're not cold, not tired, and not desperately craving more stew. Your hostess pulls a blanket over your shoulders. "You looked lovely tonight," she says. "Hungry, but lovely." You drift off thinking about food, about fasting, about how appearance and appetite were tangled up in complicated ways. You wonder how anyone survived on boiled roots and spiritual fulfillment alone. And most of all, you wonder what pigeon pie actually tastes like. The morning sun creeps back into the cottage like it's trying not to wake anyone, casting gold threads across the wooden floor and lighting up the dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Your stomach makes a small, hopeful noise. Last night's dreams were full of food-related symbolism: talking pies, rivers of broth, a goose that handed you a spoon and said, "We all starve for beauty, darling." Today, your lesson continues not with what's worn or painted, but with what's smelled. Your hostess leans over a small wooden chest and pulls out a neatly bundled collection of cloth sachets. "You'll need one of these," she tells you, pressing it into your hand. It's lavender, and maybe rosemary, all dried and wrapped in linen that smells better than you do. By a lot. Time to discover the medieval world of personal scent management, also known as the scented sleeve secret. See, bathing in this era isn't quite the everyday occurrence you're used to. There's a widespread belief that too much washing might actually open the pores to disease. And if you're thinking, that sounds unscientific, well, you're right. But here, it's gospel.so. How do people stay freshish? The solution is layers. Not just fabric, but scent. Herbs are tucked into sleeves, bodices, shoes, and even belts. You find yourself stuffing crushed bay leaves into your tunic like a nervous hamster. It's not exactly perfume, but it does cover the more ambitious odors wafting through the village streets. As you walk through the town square, you begin to pick up on the subtle perfume language of the people around you. A merchant walks past, his sleeves reeking of cloves, expensive, spicy, bold. A young woman selling ribbons wears something lighter, sweet marjoram with just a hint of rose petals. An older nun passes you, her scent almost medicinal: lavender, mint, and possibly something that once belonged in a soup. There's even a man leading a goat who smells, weirdly, of cinnamon. It's a confusing moment, but you appreciate the effort. Scent is personal, but also performative. Just like clothes or hairstyles, it communicates something about status and identity. Some fragrances like musk or ambergris are imported, rare, and eye-wateringly expensive. So if someone smells too good, you can safely assume they either have a lot of money, or at least a friend who works in imports. Back at the manor, you're handed a comb and a task: help your hostess refresh her hair, which, as it turns out, hasn't been properly washed in over a week. Instead, she's sprinkled it with rosemary, water, gently combed in powdered iris root, and braided small sprigs of dried thyme into her side buns. It smells like a medieval salad, but somehow elegant. This is all completely normal. Even royalty practiced dry hygiene. Queen Elizabeth I famously avoided public bathing, believing it to be unhealthy. And she wasn't alone. Many noblemen and women relied on perfumes, scented gloves, and fragrant head coverings to stay pleasantly pungent without involving actual soap and water. You sniff yourself and decide you need another sprig of sage in your sleeve. Later in the day, you visit the local apothecary, a dark little shop lined with jars, each labeled in barely legible script. Some hold spices, others hold things that might once have been animals. The shopkeeper, a man with impressive eyebrows and no visible sense of smell, offers you a vial of something he calls essence of lily and goosefoot. You politely decline. Instead, you're drawn to a small bundle of mint leaves and a pot of beeswax pomade infused with chamomile. You apply a little to your wrists, then to your temples. Your hostess nods in approval. You smell like someone who doesn't chop firewood, she says. That's apparently a compliment. Historians still debate how clean people actually were in the medieval world. Were baths really so rare? Did they smell as strongly as we assume? Some records suggest people washed more often than we give them credit for, especially hands, faces, and feet. But there's no denying that scent was a substitute for soap, and that personal hygiene was wrapped up in a complex stew of class, access, and wildly creative herbal combinations. A lesser-known fact: some people believed strong scents could literally protect you from illness. During the Black Death, physicians wore masks filled with fragrant herbs, hoping the sweet aromas would ward off bad air. Did it work? Not even slightly, but at least they smelled nice. While panicking. As the sun dips low, you find yourself leaning over a bowl of warm rosemary water, steaming your face like a beauty influencer with a cauldron. Your skin tingles. You sneeze a lot, but when you pull away, you do feel oddly refreshed, or maybe just slightly poached. That night, you slip into bed with lavender tied around your wrist, mint tucked under your pillow, and the faint scent of wood smoke still clinging to your clothes. The cottage is quiet, save for the creaking of the roof and the occasional disgruntled sheep outside. You exhale slowly, wondering what people 100 years from now will say about your beauty routines. Will they laugh at your serums, your jade rollers, your 15-step nighttime rituals? Probably. But at least you'll smell like someone who didn't chop firewood. Morning comes again, slipping through the cracks in the shutters like a shy visitor. The fire's gone out, but your sleeve still smells faintly of lavender, and your hair carries a whisper of chamomile. You feel mildly herbal, which is probably as fresh as anyone gets around here. As you roll out of bed, someone hands you a crust of bread and a mild smile, and you're told you'll be spending the day observing hands. Yes, hands as symbols of beauty and class. Welcome to the subtle, fascinating world of nails, rings, and quiet status. A tea first. This sounds underwhelming. Hands? How interesting can hands be? But then, as you step outside into the early bustle of village life, you notice something peculiar. Hands speak volumes here. They carry silent stories of wealth, labor, and lotion. Okay, not lotion, but something that might be a cousin to it. The first pair you notice belongs to the blacksmith. His hands are massive, rough, and permanently freckled with soot. His fingernails are short and cracked, but oddly enough, there's a ring looped onto a leather cord around his neck, a gift from someone, perhaps, or a subtle sign of pride. Then you pass a nobleman on horseback. He's not wearing gloves today, which gives you a rare peek at his perfectly smooth fingers, soft and pale, decorated with 3 delicate rings. His nails are buffed and clean. Not scrubbed, clean, just. Never actually dirty. There, The kind of hands that haven't lifted anything heavier than a feather quill or a goblet of mulled wine. A young woman selling apples holds out a fruit for you to try. Her nails are bitten, her palms dry, but her ring made of glass, not gold, catches the sun and flickers like a sapphire. It's a clever little trick, fashion without the funds. You compliment her, she beams. Turns out, nail care is a surprisingly serious business. Not necessarily because people love their nails, but because everyone else noticed them. Well-kept hands meant you were important enough not to do manual labor. That alone was a beauty standard. Smooth skin and soft fingers were basically medieval. Skincare goals, calloused palms and chipped nails, while practical, quietly marked you as part of the working class. There was no hand cream, but there was vinegar to soften skin, and rose water for those who could afford the extra flair. You try soaking your hands in a small bowl of warmed milk and herbs. It's kind of pleasant, until a goat drinks out of it when you're not looking. Rings, too, are a whole language. They weren't just decorations, they were messages. A single ring could tell people your profession, your social rank, even your marital status. A bishop's ring might bear a gemstone said to bring wisdom. A merchant's ring could be engraved with his family seal. A noblewoman's might be set with an amber stone, not just for beauty, but to keep away illness. And sometimes, rings contain tiny compartments for perfume or, more mysteriously, poison. You're allowed to try on a few from the manor's collection. One is absurdly heavy and set with a blue stone, the size of a pigeon's egg. Another is delicate, shaped like two clasped hands. That one's a betrothal ring, and someone makes a teasing joke about you being spoken for now. You blush. You also drop the ring. Twice. As you walk through the town later that afternoon, you begin looking more closely at everyone's fingers. A scribe stained with ink. A weavers are wrapped in soft linen. Even a baker you pass has flour-dusted fingertips that somehow look romantic, like they belong in a love ballad about bread and longing. You try holding your hands in elegant poses, gently folded, gracefully extended, a little flare of the pinky. It's harder than it looks. Mostly, you end up looking like you're about to faint or request more soup. Still, you admire the effort medieval people made to appear refined, even with something as humble as fingers. The gestures they used, how they held a goblet, how they pinched herbs from a dish, how they rested a hand against their cheek, were all practiced, purposeful, and a little theatrical. Hands were part of the visual language of beauty. Even the stillness of them spoke. A quirky historical note. During the 14th century, it became fashionable in some noble courts to keep fingernails long and pointed, not for function, but purely as a visual cue. Some people even painted them with crushed petals or tinted them lightly with saffron. It wasn't common, but it happened. There's a question historians still puzzle over. How widespread were these customs? Did rural villages emulate noble beauty habits, or did they have their own aesthetic entirely? Some records suggest that even peasants mimicked aristocratic styles in small, subtle ways. A ribbon tied just so, a hand posed carefully at rest. But other historians argue the divide was wider, less imitation, more parallel evolution. We may never know. As the sky turns peach and gold, you return to the cottage and sit by the window, watching your hands. They've done very little labor, but they've touched silk and straw, washed with rosemary, and worn rings with more history than some castles. They're a little red from the cold, a bit dry, but they smell faintly of mint and rose. You wrap them in a warm cloth and tuck them into your sleeves. Tonight, they'll rest too. The evening air turns syrupy slow, and your steps echo softly as you shuffle toward your next destination, the candlelit home of a local apothecary, where tonight's lesson is all about the delicate dance between bad teeth and good breath. A rather specific combination, but trust me, you're in for a treat. A very minty, mildly alarming treat. You settle inside a narrow room lined with shelves, jars filled with dried herbs, wax-sealed pots of mysterious pastes, and something labeled simply "scrape blend." A fire crackles quietly, casting wobbly shadows over a wooden chair that looks suspiciously like a dentist's throne. Minus any sense of mercy, Al. Here's the thing. Evil folks cared about their teeth. They really did. Just not quite the way we do. There were no dentists in the modern sense, no braces, no gentle reminders to floss. But there were tooth powders, there were mouth rinses, there were techniques passed down from monks, midwives, and traveling charlatans who swore a goose feather could cure gingivitis. The apothecary hands you a little pot of dentifrice. You peer inside. It's a crumbly, grayish powder made from crushed seashells, salt, and dried herbs. It smells strongly of sage and something vaguely spicy, possibly cinnamon. Possibly something you shouldn't sniff too deeply, she offers. You a twig. It's smooth, peeled at one end, and slightly frayed. Chew stick, she says. You hesitate, then do as instructed. Turns out, chewing sticks were all the rage. People would gnaw on certain twigs like licorice root or miswak until the ends frayed into soft bristles, then use them like toothbrushes. It's oddly satisfying, earthy, like brushing your teeth with a miniature tree. You swirl some minty water around in your mouth, then spit it into a brass bowl. The rinse contains vinegar, honey, and a little myrrh. Your mouth now feels like it could host a medieval dinner party and politely refuse dessert. But even with these efforts, the reality was, well, mixed. Wealthier folks had access to better ingredients, fine salt, imported cloves, even crushed pearls, yes, really, which meant cleaner mouths, but also a risk of enamel damage from overly abrasive powders. Poorer villagers often relied on salt and sage, or simply rubbed their teeth with linen cloths. Sometimes, a grimy smile was just part of the package. Still, breath was important. Really important. In a society where people stood very close to one another, no phones, no DMs, just face-to-face chatter and heavy cloaks. Halitosis was a social hazard, so they worked around it. You'd keep mint leaves in your mouth during conversation, or suck on cloves, or hide a scented pomander in your sleeve to distract from your personal aroma with something spiced and citrusy. Which brings us to our main character of the evening, the scented sleeve trick. This one's clever. You watch as a nobleman discreetly crushes a tiny bundle of dried lavender and thyme between his fingers, then tucks it into the fold of his tunic. Every time he raises his hand to gesture or lean in for a quiet word, the scent wafts outward, masking his breath, maybe even his general personhood. A cologne cloak. You try it yourself with a sachet of rosemary and mint. It's surprisingly effective. You smell like a really respectable salad. And it wasn't just herbs. Some folks used wine as a mouth rinse. Others made pastes from honey and powdered coral, which sounds luxurious until you realize it did very little except cost a lot. Charcoal was also used, though it often left a suspicious shadow on the tongue. And a certain courtier swore by swishing with mead every morning, though that may have just been breakfast. Now here's a quirky fact. One medieval toothache remedy involved placing a roasted fig behind the ear. Another suggested whispering a prayer into a hollowed hazelnut and burying it in the garden. This had no proven dental benefits, but possibly excellent emotional ones. And yes, historians are still unsure just how effective all this really was. Some skeletal remains show surprisingly good dental health for the period, particularly among peasants who eat simpler, grain-heavy diets. Others suggest chronic decay, abscesses, and the occasional tooth blackening trend in certain regions, which may have been intentional or just fashion gone fungal. We may never know how common certain habits were, but we do know this. Having sweet breath was praised in poetry, mentioned in love letters, and considered a mark of charm. It wasn't just hygiene, it was flirting. You overhear two young courtiers complimenting each other's scents in the garden. One says, "Your breath is like a spring breeze," to which the other giggles and replies, "Yours is less offensive." Then last Tuesday, romance. You can't help but smile. Then you realize you've been chewing on your clove stick a little too enthusiastically. Time to give your jaw a rest. As you wander back to the cottage under a sky dusted with stars, your mouth tingles with herbs and faint vinegar. You pass a baker closing shop, his breath gently yeasty. A child giggles, clutching a sprig of mint. From the monastery garden, someone nearby sneezes violently into a bundle of thyme and mutters an apology to the plant. You're beginning to see it now. Beauty in the Middle Ages wasn't just about how you looked. It was about how you moved, how you smelled, how you tasted hopefully pleasantly, and how you fit into the world's tiny sensory theater. Back inside, you lie down with a sachet of rosemary tucked beneath your pillow. Not for your breath this time, but for dreams. It's said to bring peaceful sleep, and tonight you believe it. This morning, your hands are the focus. You wake to birdsong fluttering through a wooden shutter. The sun has barely crept over the horizon, but already you hear distant bells, soft footfalls on packed dirt, and the metallic squeak of someone drawing water from a well. It's going to be a hands-on kind of day, literally. You stretch, wiggle your fingers, and notice them for the first time in this new life you're inhabiting. Your fingernails are short but clean, your palms roughen just slightly, and there's a little smudge of something under one nail. Soot, bread dough, an herbal poultice you applied in your half-sleep? Could be anything. In medieval times, hands spoke volumes. Not literally. They didn't have nail salons or Instagram tutorials, but a glance at your hands could reveal your status, your profession, even your proximity to nobility. Soft hands, likely high-born. Calloused fingers, definitely working class. Missing fingertips, possibly a blacksmith, or very unlucky baker. Your first stop is the home of a wealthy merchant's wife. She's kind enough, in a brisk, don't touch the tapestries sort of way. She offers you a seat and extends her hands for you to examine. You hesitate. Are we doing palm reading now? No, she just wants to show off her manicure. Her nails are filed into delicate half-moons, not painted but polished with a soft cloth until they shine faintly in the firelight. You recognize the scent of rose oil and beeswax. This, she explains, keeps her nails smooth and fragrant. There's also a ring, not just any ring, a thick gold band set with a tiny sapphire that looks like it's judging you. She wears it not only for beauty but as a silent declaration. My husband owns at least 3 ships, and I haven't drawn water in 15 years. You nod politely and excuse yourself before the sapphire grows legs and whispers your secrets. Outside, you spot a group of peasant women scrubbing linens at the river. Their hands are red from cold water, nails blunt and practical. But still, there's beauty here. Their fingers move quickly, confidently, braiding fabric as easily as they braid their daughter's hair. Their nails may not glisten, but they tell stories of harvests, of births, of long winters warmed by wool and work. You help them rinse cloth, and one of the older women grins, squinting at your soft hands. First time touching water? She jokes. You smile and wonder just how often you've been found out like this. As the sun rises higher, you find yourself in the town square watching a nobleman fuss with his gloves. They are not practical gloves. They're status gloves, thin, perfumed, embroidered with ridiculous detail, and clearly not meant for actual work. He removes them dramatically before accepting a letter, as if to say, I own these hands, and I'd like you to notice. Gloves were everywhere in the Middle Ages. not just for warmth or protection, but as accessories, tokens of courtship, symbols of rank. A bishop's gloves could be stitched with pearls. A knight's might be stiff with too much polish. There were even glove etiquette rules. Drop one by accident could be flirtation. Drop one on purpose? Definitely a challenge. But let's go smaller back to fingernails. In many noble households, there was an unspoken rule that one's nails should never show the grime of labor. A little beeswax and bone ash could be rubbed on the nail beds to make them look healthier. A lemon peel could be used to clean underneath. Some ladies tinted their nails faintly pink with crushed rose petals soaked in wine. Very faintly. Subtle beauty was key. Meanwhile, artists your next stop used their hands differently. Their nails were often stained green from picking plants. Their palms carried the scent of thyme and valerian. You help grind a few leaves into salves and feel the pleasant sting of mint seep into your skin. Here's something curious. While there are few surviving records about nail fashion, in this era, the hands themselves were often described in poetry. Fair hands, lily-white hands, gentle hands. A suitor might send a letter praising not your eyes, but your wrists delicate and pale, free from the sun's darkening touch. But even among the noble class, not all hands were idle. Noble women might spin thread, embroider, or play instruments, all things that kept their hands nimble but not dirty. It was a careful dance between productivity and appearance. You were allowed to be useful, as long as it didn't show. And while we're at it, rings were portable wealth. You see a man wearing 6 of them on one hand alone. A ruby, an amethyst, a carnelian carved with the family seal, and 2 engraved with Latin inscriptions you can't quite read. These weren't just decoration, they were identity. Some even believed rings held magical protection. One local legend insists that a bishop once cured a fever by simply pressing his ring finger to someone's forehead. Historians remain skeptical, as do foreheads. Now, a slightly grosser but fascinating aside. Nail biting. Yep, it existed. Some medieval texts warned against it not just for hygiene, but because it was seen as uncouth. Imagine being at court, trying to look mysterious and seductive, and accidentally biting a cuticle too hard. Social death. One more odd fact. In some monasteries, monks were expected to keep their fingernails short and clean as a sign of inner purity. There were even inspection days. You shudder slightly and glance at your own hands, wondering if you'd pass the test. Finally, as the day softens into gold, you walk through the village square again. A young girl offers you a small bundle of lavender as a gift. You notice her nails slightly stained from gathering berries, one chipped from climbing trees, and somehow, they are the loveliest hands you've seen all day. You take the lavender and press it gently to your lips. Not to kiss, exactly, but to smell. Your fingers now carry the soft perfume of the fields, and without realizing it, you've begun to look at your own hands differently, less for what they say about you, and more for what they've touched, held, offered, and made. Tomorrow, they'll probably smell like cloves or onion salve again, but tonight, they rest like royalty, gilded not with rings, but with quiet usefulness. You wake to the sound of rustling silk and scandal. Today, you're following a whisper, an invisible thread that leads through fashion, law, and the slippery world of status. It begins with a hemline too luxurious for the market square, of fur, trimmed that shouldn't be worn by just anyone, a forbidden shade of crimson trailing through the streets like a flag of defiance. You've entered the curious world of sumptuary laws. Your host this morning is a well-dressed tailor named Alwyn. He's friendly, a bit dramatic, and constantly eyeing the door as if a royal inspector might burst in at any moment. Watch closely, he whispers, unrolling a bolt of velvety fabric the color of crushed plums. This here, technically illegal. For most of us, You reach out and touch it. It's heavy, soft, and clearly too nice for your peasant disguise. Sumptuary laws were the medieval equivalent of style police. Government issued rules telling people what they could and couldn't wear based on class, gender, and sometimes profession. In theory, they were about morality. In practice, they were about keeping people in their place. Alwyn explains that only certain ranks could wear certain furs, like ermine or sable. Silks were reserved for the noble elite, and some colors like deep blue or Tyrian purple were practically outlawed for commoners. Even the width of a sleeve could cross a legal line. The wrong hem could mean a hefty fine, or worse, a very public scolding. You imagine being dragged into court for excessive velvet. What a glamorous crime. But there's a secret here. People broke the rules all the time. That's where Alwyn comes in. He knows how to line cheaper fabrics with a flash of silk, or blend just enough rabbit fur to pass for something fancier. He calls it artful cheating. You call it wearable rebellion. As he fits you with the modest cloak lined with absolutely not mink. He tells you about a shoemaker's daughter who wore golden thread in her headscarf and was fined 2 chickens. Her father was furious, but she said it was worth it. You step outside into the brisk morning air, watching as a procession of nobles passes by. The difference is immediate. Their garments ripple like banners. Gold stitching gleams in the sun. One young noblewoman wears sleeves so wide they could double as canopies. Her shoes are pointed so absurdly long that she must have tied the tips to her knees to walk. You try not to giggle. It's fashion, and also somehow politics. As you wander, you hear murmurs of protest. Townspeople complaining about the latest restrictions. Apparently, last week, the crown banned middle-class women from wearing jeweled girdles. Again, how are we supposed to sparkle modestly? One woman huffs. The tension lies in aspiration. In the medieval world, everyone had a place, and looking too upscale could trigger a crisis. If a baker's wife wore a pearl-studded cap, what was to stop her from trying to marry into nobility? What if her neighbor believed she was a countess in disguise? Chaos. Sumptuary laws were the solution if you believe in solving social tension with fashion police. But here's where things get fun. Enforcement was spotty at best. In theory, a merchant couldn't wear crimson. In practice, his wife wore it every festival and just called it dark rose. Tailors like Alwyn made good money walking the legal tightrope. And the nobility? They sometimes ignored the rules altogether. After all, who's going to fine a duke? A lesser-known tidbit: colors weren't just a style choice. They were steeped in meaning. Green for youth and fertility. Black for wealth and dignity, because black dye was expensive. Yellow, sometimes joyful, sometimes suspicious. And purple, if you could afford it, was the showstopper. Made from thousands of crushed sea snails, it was reserved for emperors, kings, and the dangerously overdressed. Historians still wonder whether these laws truly worked or if they mostly caused irritation and envy. There are entire records of townspeople being fined for excessive buttons. Yes, buttons. You pass a shop window displaying a dress with embroidered unicorns and pause to admire the detail. The merchant quickly pulls the curtain shut, pretending you didn't see it. That's for a duchess, he mutters, or someone pretending to be one. You nod. Your peasant outfit is probably safe, except for your new cloak, which flutters a little too gracefully. -o.by mid-afternoon, you find yourself in a church courtyard where a local priest is giving a sermon on humility. Wear not garments of excess, he intones, lest vanity possess the soul. He's wearing silk gloves. You sit beside a monk, who chuckles softly and leans toward you. That man owns 5 embroidered stoles, he whispers. 1 for each day of the week. You try not to snort out loud. Despite the rules, The desire to beautify oneself remains strong. People stitch secret messages into hems. They dye fabrics at home with crushed berries or onion skins. They save up for a single, scandalously nice belt buckle. It's a quiet rebellion, but one that keeps growing. As evening falls, you visit a festival near the village green. Music plays, firelight flickers, and people are dancing in clothes that definitely defy some regulation. A girl spins in a violet dress. A boy wears a hat with a feather that looks suspiciously noble. But no one stops them tonight. Here, beauty doesn't need permission. You sit by the fire, wrap your moderately illegal cloak tighter around you, and feel a little thrill. You've bent the rules today. Not enough to get fined, but enough to feel like you've thumbed your nose at centuries of hierarchy and fashion tyranny. Maybe tomorrow you'll wear fur, or fake it, because in this world, dressing up isn't just for vanity, it's a quiet way of saying I'm more than where I came from, and really, what's more beautiful than that? You wake to the earthy smell of morning bread baking, and the distant clang of someone hammering a horseshoe into shape. Today, you're in for a gentle kind of compare and contrast exercise. Don't worry, there's no quiz. You're strolling between two very different corners of medieval life, the village fields and the high stone halls. One smells like hay and onions. The other smells like rosewater and expensive anxiety. Welcome to the curious divide between peasant charm and courtly glamour. Your first stop, the village green. You're greeted by a woman named Edith who hands you a warm piece of barley bread and gestures toward the well. You can rinse off there, she says with a wink. If the goose hasn't claimed it. Edith wears a dress of coarse wool, belted with a frayed bit of rope. Her hair is mostly hidden under a linen coif, and her hands are rough but quick, braiding garlic into bunches while gossiping about someone's goat that allegedly got into the ill again. Her beauty is quiet, practical, and a little sun-kissed. Rosy cheeks from working in the wind, laugh lines, nails stained with blackberry juice. She smells faintly of smoke and rosemary. You like it here. In this world, beauty isn't about transformation, it's about balance. Too much powder, and your neighbors might think you're hiding something. Too much bathing, and they'll think you're vain. But if your hair is combed, your apron's clean, and you smell like thyme or mint, that's peak attractiveness. Folk think it's all dirt and piglets, Edith tells you, tossing a log onto the fire. But we care about appearances too. Just not the fancy kind. Then she leans in conspiratorially and adds, we even have perfume. It's called not smelling like cabbage. You head off toward the manor by midday, brushing ash off your sleeves as the thatched roofs give way to towers and banners. The air smells different here, less of soup, more of lavender, and just a touch of, don't touch that, it's imported. A young servant named Henry meets you at the gates. Quick, he whispers, don't step on the tapestries, they're being aired out. He leads you into a hall filled with polished wood, stained glass, and more mirrors than you thought existed in the 1300s. The noble residents here glide, rather than walk. They wear fabrics that ripple like water and maintain expressions that say, I have never known the burden of a beat. Their hair is impossibly clean, their nails, buffed and buffeted by servants. Their shoes are entirely impractical for mud, labor, or fun. You watch as a lady applies a subtle rose salve to her lips using a tiny silver spoon. It makes them look more poetic, she explains. Everything here is symbolic. A pale face means you don't toil outside. Perfumed gloves suggest you can afford luxury on your fingertips. Even the way someone sits is stiff. Side-angled lean signals that they are elegant and also probably very uncomfortable. And while peasants might braid their hair to keep it out of the way, noble women weave theirs with ribbons, pearls, or even gold threads. One woman wears a headpiece that looks suspiciously like an upside-down pastry. You wonder how it stays on. Henry leans over and whispers, "She has pins longer than your hand." It's a miracle she can nod. As afternoon light streams in, you begin to notice the small, shared threads. Both Edith and the courtly ladies use herbs just differently. Both prize clean skin, though the court has more access to creams and powders. Both worlds respect beauty, but define it on wildly different terms, and neither is free from pressure. In the village, a girl who's too polished might be mocked. In the manor, one who doesn't maintain appearances risks social suicide, or, worse, being mistaken for someone of lower status. It's all a performance, just with different costumes. Here's a fun little historical detail. Nobles sometimes sent paintings of themselves to potential suitors. Imagine the medieval version of profile pictures, except the artist conveniently forgets to include that small wart or crooked tooth. Peasants, meanwhile, sent bread, sometimes cheese, still romantic in its way. One odd, lesser-known debate. Historians still wonder how strictly these beauty ideals trickled down the social ladder. Did country girls imitate the nobility, or did they scoff and stick with their own rustic flair? Records suggest both. People are complicated like that. As the sun begins to set, you find yourself seated at the edge of a field, watching two worlds blur. A nobleman on a hunting ride waves to some villagers. A peasant child runs past wearing a cast-off cloak that once belonged to a squire. Styles mix, ideals soften. You realize beauty wasn't a single standard, it was layered, local, and always evolving. And no matter where you belonged, someone was probably watching to see if your apron was tied correctly or your wimple folded at the right angle. Human nature, it seems, has always been a little judgy. But as twilight deepens and the hearths begin to glow, you think back to Edith and her practical charm. You also remember the noblewoman with lips like rose petals and posture like a statue. Both were beautiful. You lean back into the soft grass, the air carrying scents of evening bread and distant lavender, and feel gently suspended between two versions of the same human instinct, to make oneself lovely, whether by garlic braids or gold-threaded sleeves. The next morning arrives with the sound of a camel's low grunt. Yes, a camel, because today, you're waking up not in a medieval village or stone-walled manor, but at a bustling way station along the Silk Road, sometime around the 13th century. The air smells of warm spices, sun-baked cloth, and distant mystery. And there's sand in your shoe. Again, you're surrounded by voices: Persian, Arabic, Mongolic, and Italian, trading silk, paper, incense, lapis lazuli, and yes, even fashion trends. Beauty, you discover, doesn't just belong to one world. It travels carried in perfume vials, embroidery stitches, and delicate kohl-lined eyes. In the tent next to yours, a merchant's wife is lining her lashes with black powder made of soot and oils. It keeps away the evil eye, she explains. And men, she chuckles softly. She hands you a small bronze mirror, polished until it's almost reflective. You blink at your tired face and try a little of the kohl yourself. The result is somewhere between mysteriously alluring and eyeliner accident. But she nods, approving. Better, she says. Now, you have the gaze of a woman who knows secrets. Back in Europe, this style of lined eyes has started to catch on among the upper class. Noble women order it imported, calling it exotic, and whispering that it might be magical. Some mix it with ground pearl. Others apply it in secret because the church isn't entirely sold on eyes that smolder. And it's not just eyeliner. You see silks and colors never before worn by northern nobles: vivid indigo, saffron, deep emerald. You spot sleeves with Mongol-inspired patterns, jewelry with Islamic calligraphy, and robes stitched with dragons that definitely didn't originate in France. A Venetian trader tells you, the ladies in Florence are mad for Eastern scars. I sold one for the price of a cow. Some of the imported trends are subtle. A new perfume recipe that uses ambergris and myrrh. A gold-threaded cap modeled after Persian bridal wear. Others are, well, less subtle. One English noblewoman apparently tried wearing a Turkish bridal headdress the size of a soup cauldron. It did not go well at court, but it was very memorable. You sit down to share a meal with the merchant from Damascus, and he explains that in his homeland, beauty is tied not just to the face, but to grace how one pours tea, recites poetry, or walks without flapping like an excited duck. Your European nights, he says, are too loud. You can't really argue with that. Historians still debate just how much these Silk Road imports shaped European fashion. Were they passing fads or foundational shifts? Some say they revolutionized noble wardrobes. Others believe the church worked hard to suppress foreign vanity. But the evidence lies in the art. Suddenly, in frescoes and illuminated manuscripts, the fabrics shimmer more. The eyes glint darker, the hems dip lower, the sleeves grow longer, wider, sometimes so wide they risk catching fire if you're not careful near a candle. And the influence went both ways. European wools, glass beads, and even dyes made their way east. Ideas of beauty weren't just borrowed, they were shared, adapted, reimagined. You find this all very exciting and a bit overwhelming. Beauty now feels less like a castle or a cottage and more like a caravan, constantly moving, swapping stories, picking up a new shade of rouge here, a twist of hair fashion there. By late afternoon, you're helping to pack up a merchant's cart, tucking fragrant pouches of saffron between bolts of fabric. You pause to breathe in the scent. It's sharp and honeyed, like golden sunlight in powder form. You wonder if someone in a French court will someday sprinkle this into a bath or a biscuit. Your guide smiles. Saffron makes you beautiful, he says. You raise an eyebrow. How? By making you smell expensive. A fair point. As the caravan begins to move again, the sun casts long shadows over the desert. You sit atop a cart between bundles of cloth and vials of perfume. Wind plays with your hair, which is still carrying hints of musk and rosewater. You're not quite medieval Europe anymore, and not fully Asia either. You're somewhere in between, suspended in a time when borders were porous, ideas were currency, and beauty was whatever caught the next pair of curious eyes. You close your own for a moment, lulled by the gentle jangle of bridles and the dusty rhythm of hooves. And in that drowsy half-dream, you picture a noblewoman back in London smoothing her imported scarf, unaware it once rode beside you. You're on the move again, though this time your boots land squarely on lush, dewy grass. The sun is just peeking over the horizon, gilding the hills in gold, and your destination is a tournament, a full-blown medieval joust complete with trumpet fanfare, ribbon lances, and dramatically fluffed hair. Yes, hair. Because today, you're not a peasant or a merchant, not even a curious wanderer. Today, you're a squire in training, and you've been assigned to help a knight prepare for what is essentially the medieval version of a highly competitive beauty pageant. On horseback, with weapons. As you approach the tiltyard, you spot your knight Sir Emmerich standing beside his armor, striking a pose so noble it borders on theater. His helmet gleams in the morning sun, freshly polished to reflect not just enemy lances, but the admiring gaze of ladies in the stands. His hair is damp from rosewater. You know this because you just applied it. Do I look suitably valiant? He asks without turning. You smell like a floral hedge, you reply. He seems pleased. Despite the heavy armor and the talk of battle, appearances matter enormously here. A knight's handsomeness, yes, that's the word, is half of his reputation. The ladies in the grandstand aren't just judging combat skill. They're noting posture, cleanliness, charm, and whether one's beard is more heroic stubble or barnyard accident. Before the tournament begins, you help Sir Emmerich into his padded doublet. It's embroidered with his family crest, but also subtly tailored to emphasize his shoulders. "Tailoring is the real sword," he once muttered while sucking in his stomach. He wasn't entirely joking. His hair has been combed and scented, his nails scrubbed, his boots buffed. Underneath his armor, he's wearing linen that was boiled with lavender, because even chivalry has olfactory expectations. You brush some imaginary dust off his shoulder, and he sighs dramatically, preparing to mount his horse. Knights weren't always portrayed as rough, brutish warriors. In many courts, especially in France and Italy, the ideal knight was cultured, poetic, and yes, pleasing to look at. They wrote love poetry, kept mirrors in their chambers, and in some cases, wore makeup. Really, some sources suggest subtle rouge on pale cheeks, especially before attending court or composing a tearful sonnet about unrequited love. Today's tournament begins with ceremonial riding, a kind of beauty parade on horseback. Sir Emmerich's horse is draped in brocade. His lance is painted. His helmet plume could double as a feather duster for royalty. He gallops past the stands, earning cheers, gasps, and at least one handkerchief thrown with suspiciously practiced flair. You can't help but notice how much of this is pageantry. There's even a beauty standard for scars. A clean, visible scar on the cheek or jaw. Dashing, mysterious, likely to attract sonnet writing admirers. But a broken nose? Less ideal. One knight in attendance is wearing a silver nose guard to distract from a poorly healed injury. You hear someone whisper, "He looked better last season." The tournament progresses with clashing, cheering, and a few ungraceful tumbles. But between each bout, knights retreat to their pavilions to dab sweat, reapply perfume, or discreetly fix a dented breastplate. You fetch water, straighten tunics, and once remove a wayward leaf from someone's chainmail hairnet. Historians still debate how far these beauty rituals went. Some claim they were exaggerated later in romanticized texts. Others argue knights took pride in their appearance because it reflected their virtue. One theory suggests that looking handsome and composed, even after nearly being flattened by a charging opponent, was a sign of divine favor. Of course, not all knights were dashing. Some were decidedly undash-like. But tales of Arthurian legends and courtly romances set expectations. Strong jawlines, gleaming armor, and the emotional availability of a man who weeps at poetry but still wins a duel. After the final round, Sir Emmerich limps slightly but looks triumphant. His armor is scratched. His sash is crooked, but he's glowing. A young lady hands him a ribbon, and he bows with a wink. You notice she blushes. You also notice he's definitely going to need a foot soak later. That evening, the knights retire to the feast hall, where candlelight softens every angle and hides every bruise. Wine flows. Lutes are plucked. You're handed a goblet and a slice of something vaguely poultry-flavored. A tea. The long table. Sir Emmerich is already spinning his version of the day's events. In his retelling, he blocked a lance with a single pinky finger and dazzled the opponent with his symmetrical jaw. You sit back, content. Beauty, it seems, isn't just in the face, it's in the legend. And knights knew how to craft a good one. As the fire crackles and the harpist plays a sleepy tune, you feel your eyelids grow heavy. You glance at the knight beside you, who's attempting to fix a smudge on his boot using a bread crust. Chivalry, it turns out, is a surprisingly high-maintenance profession. You wake the next morning to the sound of church bells, slow, solemn, echoing across stone and damp morning mist. Your feet are sore, your back is stiff, and someone has tied a ribbon to your ankle while you slept. which may or may not be a sign of affection. You decide not to investigate. Today, you're headed to a local apothecary and then on to a village square, where the real gossip of the day isn't war or taxes, but freckles. Yes, freckles. The medieval world was awash in opinions about skin. Soft, pale, spotless skin was ideal, especially for noblewomen who were supposed to be delicate, untouched by sun or labor. But the moment a freckle popped up, or worse, a wart, people started whispering. You stroll past a market stall selling jars of rose salve and bundles of dried mint. One vendor tries to sell you a miraculous mole balm, which smells suspiciously like garlic. He swears it'll remove blemishes and curses, though he won't elaborate on which curses exactly. Warts were often seen as more than just cosmetic flaws. They were sometimes interpreted as signs of inner corruption, or even witchcraft. A wart on the hand? Suspicious. A mole on the back? Possibly cursed. Medieval people loved to assign meaning to things, especially things they couldn't explain. And when it came to faces, every mark was fair game for interpretation. Holy marks, however, were a different story. Some skin markings, particularly symmetrical birthmarks or naturally shaped crosses, were seen as divine signs. There's even a story of a girl whose wine-colored birthmark in the shape of a chalice earned her special treatment at a convent. Whether or not that story is true, it gives you a sense of how easily beauty and belief became intertwined. You enter the apothecary, a dark wooden shop packed with curious jars and dried roots hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers grown sideways. The air smells like thyme, vinegar, and ambition. The apothecary, a bearded man with impossibly clean fingernails, offers you a cream made from powdered snail shells and vinegar. Good for freckles, he says, smiling, and exceptionally good for giving people something to talk about. You decline politely. Freckles were more common among working people, those who spent time outdoors. Peasants and farmers bore the marks of their labor on their skin, and while those marks told stories of resilience, they didn't match the era's elite beauty standards. That said, not everyone hated freckles. In some parts of Ireland and Scotland, where pale skin and speckled cheeks were common, local songs even romanticized them. You remember hearing a ballad about the maiden whose cheeks were stars, which might sound lovely now, but was likely sung with a fiddle and an uncomfortable number of goats nearby. Historians still debate how consistent these views really were. Did everyone really hate blemishes? Or was it more about class than beauty? Some argue that noblewomen were admired for their skin only because it showed they didn't have to work. Others suggest religious symbolism played a deeper role. Skin being pure, as a reflection of the soul. You exit the apothecary with a small jar of lavender balm, more for the scent than the skin care, and make your way toward the town green. There, a woman is painting her face with a paste made from almond milk and crushed eggshells. For lightness, she says, tilting her chin to the sun. Her freckles are faint but visible. You ask if she minds them. Only when the priest notices. She replies with a wink. Nearby, two boys argue over whether a spot on the village elder's cheek is a wart or a wisdom mark. No one wins the argument, but everyone agrees not to touch it. You find a shaded spot beneath a tree, your jar of balm tucked under your arm, and you begin to doze as the chatter of freckles and fate floats through the air like bees on breeze. You're learning that in this era, beauty was never just about looks. It was a layered thing, part superstition, part health, part societal role. A freckle wasn't just a freckle. A mole could be mystical. A scar might be a story. And a clear face? That was sometimes just luck. As the wind rustles the trees, you feel the warmth of the sun dappling your own skin. Freckle-worthy, perhaps. But here and now, that just means you've spent another curious day outside, and really, that's its own kind of charm. By now, your feet have carried you through cobbled cities, candlelit castles, spice-filled markets, and dusty roads, lined with whispers, and yet, as evening falls again, you find yourself somewhere entirely new, a medieval bathhouse. Yes, a bathhouse. Because contrary to popular belief, people in the Middle Ages did wash. Not all of the, always, and certainly, not with lemon-scented shampoo, but bathing. And how it tied into beauty was an entire ritual. You enter through a thick wooden door, greeted immediately by steam and the faint aroma of rosemary. The air is damp and drowsy. Robes rustle softly as townsfolk wander through. It's co-ed, surprisingly, and somehow, not awkward at all. Everyone's more interested in soaking away their aches than in judging anyone's knees. A servant offers you a small towel and points to a wooden bench. As you sit, you can hear water trickling through hidden channels in the stone. It's peaceful, like a spa, but with more hay on the floor. A woman beside you scrubs her arms with crushed salt and rose petals. Softens the skin, she says. Makes you look less like you've fought a goat. That's a compliment in this era. Bathhouses were popular throughout much of medieval Europe, especially in places with Roman influence. Cities like Paris, Prague, and even small villages in the Holy Roman Empire had public bathhouses. They weren't just for hygiene, they were social hubs, gossip centers, matchmaking grounds, and, in some places, even attached to medical practices. Get a hot soak and a questionable diagnosis, all in one place. You slip into a shallow tub filled with warm, herbal-infused water. The herbs change depending on what the bathkeeper can find. Lavender, sage, thyme. One tub smells like boiled onions, but you're told it's good for the joints. You quietly pass on that one. Here, beauty is about smoothness and scent. Body odor, while common in the Middle Ages, was not always accepted, especially among the wealthy. Those who could afford it washed more frequently, applied perfumed oils, and scrubbed their skin with rough linen cloths. The smoother the skin, the higher the compliments. Silky as a noblewoman's elbow was, apparently, high praise. The bath. Attendants hand out small flasks of scented oil, usually almond or elderflower. You massage a little into your arms, and instantly feel 30% more important. Another guest, a baker's wife, asks what scent you're wearing. When you tell her, she offers you a trade, a lavender oil for one of her husband's spiced buns. You say yes, because obviously, but not everyone approved of these pampering rituals. Some religious authorities worried bathhouses encouraged vanity or worse, sinful thoughts. In some cities, bathing was discouraged entirely, especially during periods of plague, when it was believed that water opened the pores and allowed sickness in. Ironically, this made some people smell worse during times they really could have used a scrub. Still, many continued their routines. In monasteries, monks had scheduled bath days. Noble women often bathed at home, with scented water brought in and heated over fires. There are records of queens traveling with their own bathtubs, sometimes carved from wood and lined with linen. You lean back in your own tub, half asleep, half drenched, thinking how beauty has always walked that fine line between indulgence and virtue, between cleanliness and sin, between the divine scent of thyme and the slightly less divine scent of medieval socks. Historians still debate the regularity of bathing practices. Did most people bathe once a week? Once a month? Did they really scrub behind the ears? Some argue that peasants bathed in rivers when they could. Others claim that hot water was reserved mostly for the rich. The truth likely varies, depending on class, climate, and access to clean water. As the steam thickens around you and the low murmur of other bathers fades into background fuzz, you find yourself drowsing. Your skin feels warm, your limbs are heavy, and you smell faintly of elderflower. and boiled linen, you wonder, not for the first time, what beauty must have felt like back then. Less filtered, less flawless, more about care, about rituals like this. The warm water, the soft oil, the borrowed towel, the whispered compliment from a stranger who smells vaguely like garlic and lye soap. You rise slowly, wrap yourself in a rough linen robe, and step out into the cool night air. The sky is dark, but speckled with stars. Your cheeks glow from the heat. Your hair is damp. You look like someone who knows a secret, and maybe you do. By now, your skin is glowing, your feet are calloused in historically accurate ways, and you smell like a cross between a herb garden and a small forest fire. You've tried medieval skin balms, avoided freckles with moderate success, and survived a co-ed bathhouse without scandal. But today, you're headed somewhere entirely different. A medieval beauty salon. Sort of. It's not a salon in the modern sense, no hair dryers or French manicures here. Instead, it's the back room of a noblewoman's house, where a servant, a cousin, and a surprisingly knowledgeable goat herder are gathered around a wooden stool. On the stool, a very patient woman with a very large forehead. Ah, yes, the forehead, the crown jewel of medieval facial fashion. You see, the higher the forehead, the better. A broad, smooth, unbroken forehead was the medieval equivalent of a perfect Instagram filter, and some people went to great lengths to get it. You're handed a small mirror, really just polished bronze, and invited to examine your own forehead. It's fine, ordinary, a little sunburned from your walk here, but not nearly lofty enough for the current beauty ideal. The noblewoman beside you gently lifts her veil, revealing a hairline that's, well, ambitious, she explains, in an almost apologetic tone, that she plucks it daily, one hair at a time, sometimes with thread, sometimes with tiny seashells, sometimes with tweezers carved from bone. She also shaves the sides a little, just to make sure her head looks as smooth and egg-like as possible. An elegant dome, she calls it. You're offered the chance to try. You politely decline. This obsession with high foreheads wasn't just about aesthetics. A larger forehead was seen as a sign of intelligence, nobility, and purity. You know, all the things that go great with mild self-inflicted tweezing. It's not the only strange beauty trend of the era. Some women applied a light paste of lead-based foundation to even out their complexion, though this came with a small side effect of, slow poisoning. Others dabbed on crushed elderberries for a hint of blush, or rubbed fresh rose petals on their lips to make them redder. Teeth, by contrast, were not often a beauty focus. Having all of them was considered a bonus, but not required. A servant starts to brush your hair with the comb carved from horn. It pulls more than you'd like, but it's oddly relaxing, like getting ready for a costume party that just happens to take place during a famine. She weaves your hair into 2 tight braids and pins them up around your head in a crown-like loop. It's both regal and mildly itchy. Next to you, the goat herder is mixing a concoction of egg whites and powdered sage. For shine, he says, holding it up proudly. You're not sure where he learned this, but everyone nods approvingly. Someone else pulls out a small jar of beeswax and suggests using it as lip balm. You wonder how many people accidentally ate their beauty products back then. Probably a lot. Then comes perfume, or what passes for it. A blend of dried herbs, crushed flower petals, and vinegar. You dab a little behind your ears. It's pungent, not unpleasant, just very noticeable. Like you're being followed by a salad. Fashion, hair, scent, and skin were all woven together in a beauty routine that was part self-expression, part social signaling. The better you looked, the more likely people assumed you were healthy, wealthy, and virtuous. If your hair was shiny, you were probably not cursed. If your cheeks glowed, you probably didn't have the plague. That sort of thing. But even here, In this cozy room lit by a single beeswax candle and the sound of a goat quietly chewing in the corner, you sense the universality of it all. People just trying to look a little better, feel a little brighter. Whether they're using mascara or mashed up beetroot, historians still debate how much these beauty standards were imposed versus embraced. Did women genuinely love their high foreheads? Or did they just adapt to what was expected? Some scholars point to love poems that romanticize these features, others argue the poets were just following trends. The truth, as usual, sits somewhere between a blush and a guess. You glance again in the bronze mirror. Your cheeks are flushed, your forehead is still comfortably average, and your hair smells vaguely of eggs. And yet, you feel a strange sense of camaraderie with these women, these people doing their best with what they've got. Tweezers, eggshells, beeswax, and all, you say your goodbyes, and step out into the fading light, your new medieval updo, catching the last golden rays of sun. Somewhere behind you, the goat belches. A moment of beauty ruined, or maybe just completed. The streets are beginning to quiet now. Smoke curls gently from stone chimneys, mixing with the earthy scent of damp wool and bread crusts. You tug your cloak a little tighter. It's been a long day of forehead admiration, rose petal cosmetics, and highly flammable perfumes. You think you've seen it all, until you're ushered into a courtyard where a small group of women is gathered around something peculiar. A tiny iron pot bubbles gently over a low fire, and next to it, a brush, a mirror, and a handful of thick, braided threads. It takes a moment to realize what's happening. Tonight, you're getting a medieval eyebrow makeover. Before you can protest, a friendly older woman beckons you forward and pats the stool beside her. She's got steady hands, a wicked grin, and precisely one eyebrow left. Fashion, she says solemnly, demands sacrifice. Apparently, eyebrows in this era are optional. In certain regions and time periods, particularly in the later Middle Ages, thin, or even non-existent eyebrows were considered elegant. The goal? A smooth, uninterrupted sweep from forehead to eye. It created a look of serene intelligence, or mild surprise. Historians still debate which. You lean in for a closer look at the tools. There's a bit of wax, some homemade thread for pulling hairs, and what you think is a medieval spoolie brush carved from a bird bone. It's charming, and a little scary, like a beauty routine designed by woodland creatures with an aggressive sense of aesthetics. One of the women uses a tiny blade to carefully shape the brow of a nobleman's daughter, who appears both bored and resigned. She's betrothed to a baron, the woman whispers. He likes a clean arch. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds like something said in a modern spa with cucumber water. Then someone holds up a wooden tray with little lumps of pigment, burnt almonds, ground charcoal, and surprisingly crushed beetles. Yes, beetles. For just the right shade of dramatic. You're gently handed a mirror and encouraged to try it yourself. The charcoal goes on surprisingly smoothly, smudged delicately with a fingertip. Your reflection now sports bold, sweeping brows, and a faint look of historical mischief. It's oddly empowering. Eyebrow styles varied wildly throughout medieval Europe. In England and France, thinner was often better, especially among the elite. Meanwhile, in parts of Italy and Spain, thicker brows sometimes remained in fashion. Much depended on religious leanings, class, and which royal portraits were trending at the time. Medieval influencers, usually queens, set the bar, and, just as in any era, some trends were quietly resisted. Peasant women often kept their brows natural, partly out of practicality, and partly because, well, they had cabbages to worry about. Monks and nuns avoided vanity altogether, though a few records suggest certain abbeys tolerated minor grooming for cleanliness. Of course, as the fire crackles and laughter floats up into the night air, someone begins to sing softly. It's a lullaby of sorts, something about hair ribbons and lost hens. You're not sure of the words, but the melody is simple and soothing. You sit back, your eyebrows now properly ennobled, according to the enthusiastic stylist, and watch the others touch up their faces with various powders and salves. Some even paint tiny design stars, vines, or moons near their temples using mineral pigment and goose quills. Its artistic expression meets fashion, meets a mild risk of lead exposure. Beauty, you realize, wasn't just about attraction. It was storytelling. It said something about who you were, where you came from, and which feast you were hoping to be invited to. Historians still debate how widespread these artistic embellishments were. Some believe they were rare, reserved for special occasions. Others think more women practiced kitchen cosmetics than records suggest. After all, few recipe books include eyeliner made from soot and lard, but we found the tools. As the fire dims and shadows deepen, someone wraps a soft woolen shawl around your shoulders. The cool breeze touches your cheeks, and for a moment, you feel like a mysterious noble disguised as a traveling bard. Your brows are perfect. Your hair smells like elderflower and ambition. You're ready for anything except, perhaps, an open flame. You rise slowly, giving a polite bow to your eyebrow artist and her wax pot of dreams. They wave you off with gentle pride. A gaggle of medieval glam squad members who know they've done good work. You step back into the lane, the stars wheeling lazily above you, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet, and as you walk, the night seems to hush in appreciation. Even the goats are impressed. You walk beneath the weight of stars, brows bold and regal, forehead high enough to declare minor political ambitions. Somewhere behind you, a goat sneezes in approval. But tonight's journey isn't quite done yet, not until you've seen how beauty meets devotion. You're guided toward the convent on the edge of town, its stone walls pale under the moonlight. A soft bell tolls as you arrive, not an alarm, just a gentle marking of the hour, like a sleepy yawn from the building itself. A nun meets you at the gate, her face serene, her hair completely hidden beneath layers of linen and wool. She nods politely and opens the door. Inside, it's quiet and cool. The air smells of lavender and beeswax. You pass through narrow hallways lit by low oil lamps, the flicker casting playful shadows across carved saints and sleepy-eyed cherubs. The convent may not seem like the most obvious place to explore beauty, but here, it's just more subtle, more inward. You're led to a small room where a few women sit on cushions, weaving intricate embroidery under the dim light. Their faces are bare, no pigments, no beeswax gloss. And yet, there's a calm grace in their appearance, gentle skin, eyes that glow from candlelight and quiet reflection. One of the older sisters smiles as she threads her needle. Beauty is in the order of things, she says, gesturing to the embroidery stretched across her lap. It's a flowering vine, impossibly delicate, curling around a tiny stitched bird. And she's right. Here, beauty isn't about display, it's about detail, routine, and quiet care. The rhythm of life in the convent is like embroidery itself. Small, repetitive acts that eventually shape something whole. The nuns have their own grooming routines, though they're more about hygiene than style. Clean hands, tidy fingernails, fresh water for washing each morning, scented gently with mint or rosemary if it's available. Hair is always covered, but still washed and combed beneath the veil. You even spot a wooden comb carved with a delicate pattern of lilies and crosses, a secret flare beneath the surface. One nun shows you how they crush dried lavender into sachets to tuck into their robes. Keeps the lice away, she says, and lifts the mood. You sniff one. It smells like soft sleep and ancient libraries. Interestingly, some convents were known for making beauty products, rosewater, ointments, herbal balms, not for vanity, but for healing, and occasionally for income. These women were often the neighborhood's quiet apothecaries, blending lavender with vinegar, mint with honey, saving people one poultice at a time. You sit down beside the embroidery circle, and they offer you a needle. You do your best. Your flower looks more like a pancake, but no one says anything. One sister pats your arm kindly. Practice is holy, she whispers. It's in this place, wrapped in hush and ritual, that beauty reveals itself differently. Not as decoration, but as care. A brushed sleeve, a straight seam, a smile warmed by candlelight. Historians still debate just how much personal grooming was permitted in religious communities. Some convents were stricter than others, hair cropped short. No mirrors allowed. Others allowed a little more softness. One letter from a 12th century abbess even mentions how good soap keeps morale up during long fasts. Her priorities were clear. You lie back on a woven mat, the gentle murmur of stitching all around you, and gaze at the wooden ceiling. Patterns of light flicker above you. You realize this moment of stillness, care, and soft human effort might be the purest expression of medieval beauty yet. You don't need rouge to be radiant. Sometimes all it takes is a warm cloth, a quiet room, and people who know how to thread a needle in the dark. Eventually, you rise. One of the sisters presses a lavender sachet into your hand. For your dreams, she says. You walk back out into the night, the scent following you like a spell, and realize that beauty isn't always bold. Sometimes it's barely there, just a hint of kindness, stitched softly into your day. You return to the village slowly, your steps lighter, your mind a touch hazier, as if you've already begun to drift toward sleep. The streets are nearly empty now, just a few lanterns flickering like lazy fireflies, and the soft scuffle of someone sweeping their doorstep in the dark. Somewhere in the distance, a lute plays a lullaby so faint, you wonder if you're imagining it. Your journey through medieval beauty has brought you through powder rooms and herb gardens, embroidery circles and eyebrow salons. And now, just before you tuck yourself into the 14th century equivalent of a weighted blanket of very heavy wool quilt, you arrive at your final stop, the home of an older herbalist named Margaret. Her cottage is crooked in all the best ways. The roof is mossy, the door leans slightly, and the windows glint with candlelight and condensation. She invites you in with a nod, says nothing, but hands you a small ceramic cup. The tea smells faintly of violets, honey, and something minty that you can't quite name. You sip it. It tastes like naps. Margaret is part healer, part gossip, part philosopher. She speaks in slow, thoughtful phrases, like she's measuring her words with a spoon. Beauty's like soup, she says. You can try to fix it too much and ruin the flavor. You nod like that makes perfect sense. She pulls a wooden box from beneath her bench and opens it to reveal a strange little collection: dried orange peels, crushed oyster shells, rose petals, bits of chalk, a few lumps of beeswax, and unexpectedly a perfectly smooth pebble painted with a smiling face. You look at her questioningly. Practice doll, she says. Everyone starts somewhere. Margaret demonstrates a beauty bomb using egg white and powdered pearl, one that, she claims, makes your skin as smooth as a bishop's bald head. You resist the urge to laugh and try not to picture the comparison too vividly. She pats the bomb gently onto the back of your hand. It feels tight, cool, and ever so slightly ridiculous, but also soothing, like it's less about results and more about the ritual. That's Margaret's whole approach. Beauty is a ritual, a quiet promise you make to yourself before stepping into the world. And for many in the medieval world, rituals like this mattered, not just for vanity, but for health, for marriage, for hope. A good-smelling tonic meant someone might hire you. A clean face could gain a little favor. A flushed cheek might suggest vitality. The line between beauty and survival was thinner than we might think. You ask Margaret if she has a favorite beauty trick. She grins and taps her teeth. Charcoal, she says, not just for fires. Indeed, brushing teeth with charcoal was one folk remedy among many. Along with sage, mint, and even crushed seashells, some medieval folks cared deeply about fresh breath and bright smiles. And it makes sense after all. What's the point of good cheekbones if you whisper like a compost heap? Margaret leans close, whispering that she once knew a woman who mixed beet juice with cinnamon bark for lip color. It stained beautifully, but also made her irresistible to bees. There's always a trade, she shrugs. You both sit in companionable silence, your fingers sticky with balm, your brain starting to move slower like someone's turning down the brightness in your mind. The air is thick with herbs and candle, smoke, and even your eyebrows feel relaxed. Historians still argue over how much of medieval beauty was performative versus personal. Was it all about marriage and politics? Or did people like Margaret sometimes just enjoy the quiet joy of self-care? The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle. You leave Margaret's home with the fresh sachet of dried flowers, a dab of lip tint that tastes like cloves, and a deeply renewed appreciation for anyone who has ever tried to look presentable without electricity. As you wander back toward your humble bed of hay and linen, you realize the medieval world didn't separate beauty from the rest of life. It was woven into it. From holy rituals to market flirtations, from convent routines to battlefield grooming, yes. Knights wore perfume allegedly. Beauty was a thread running softly through everything. And as you curl into your little sleeping nook, moonlight brushing the stone wall nearby, the final thought drifts lazily through your mind. You, with your clean face and daring brows, would absolutely have started a trend.